Picture this. It's May 1945. World War II has just ended. Allied soldiers are walking through the gates of concentration camps across Europe. They're seeing horrors they never imagined. Mountains of bodies. Starving prisoners who look like skeletons. And among the Nazi guards they're arresting, something surprises them. Women. Lots of women. These weren't just secretaries or nurses. These were guards who had beaten prisoners, who had selected people for death, who had committed terrible crimes. And now, as the world began to understand what happened during the Holocaust, everyone had one question. What do we do with these women? Today we're going to explore one of the most disturbing chapters of history. The story of female Nazi guards. Who were they? What did they do? And most importantly, what happened to them after the war ended? This is a story that will shock you. It will make you think, and it might change how you understand evil itself. Let's begin. Part 1. Who were these women? Before we talk about what happened after the war, we need to understand who these women were. Because that's the really scary part. They weren't monsters from birth. They were ordinary people. Most female Nazi guards came from normal German families. They were daughters, sisters, and wives. Some were factory workers. Others were secretaries or shop assistants. Many joined the SS guard system because they needed money during hard economic times. The job paid well and gave them power they never had before. The Nazis called these women Officerinnen. That's the German word for female overseers or guards. Between 1939 and 1945, approximately 3,500 to 5,000 women served as concentration camp guards. That might not sound like a lot, but these women had incredible power over hundreds of thousands of prisoners. Let's talk about some of the most notorious ones. Their stories will help you understand what happened later. First, there was Irma Grese. She became a guard at age 18. Young, blonde, and by all accounts, beautiful. But prisoners called her the beautiful beast. Why? Because she carried a whip and a pistol, and she wasn't afraid to use them. She beat prisoners for fun. She set dogs on them. Former prisoners said she seemed to enjoy their suffering. Then there was Ilse Koch. People called her the Witch of Buchenwald. She was married to the camp commandant, but she was more than just a wife. Prisoners testified that she had lampshades made from human skin. She collected tattoos by having tattooed prisoners killed and their skin preserved. Even other Nazis thought she went too far. Dorothea Bin started as a kitchen worker, but became the chief guard at Ravensbrück, the main women's concentration camp. Survivors remembered her as cold and cruel. She would beat prisoners with a whip until they collapsed. She selected women for execution without any emotion on her face. Herta Both worked at several camps including Bergen-Belsen. When British soldiers liberated that camp, they were so horrified by what they saw that they forced the SS guards, including Both, to bury the thousands of corpses lying everywhere. These women weren't acting under orders for everything they did. Yes, the Nazi system was evil. Yes, they were following a terrible ideology. But witnesses said many of them seemed to enjoy the cruelty. They volunteered for the worst jobs. They went beyond what was required. And that's what made their crimes so disturbing. They chose this. Part 2. The end of the war. Now let's fast forward to 1945. Germany is losing the war badly. Allied forces are closing in from all sides. The Soviets are coming from the east. The Americans, British, and other allies are coming from the west. The Nazis know the end is near. As Allied armies got closer to the camps, the Nazis tried to hide evidence of their crimes. They burned documents. They destroyed gas chambers. They forced prisoners on death marches, moving them from camp to camp, hoping to keep the Allies from finding them. Many female guards fled. They changed their names. They burned their uniforms. They tried to blend in with millions of refugees flooding across Germany. Some succeeded for years, some forever, but others got caught almost immediately. When British soldiers liberated Bergen-Belsen concentration camp on April 15, 1945, they found something beyond imagination. Over 60,000 prisoners were still alive, but barely. Thousands were dying every day from starvation and disease. And there were about 13,000 corpses just lying on the ground, unburied. The British soldiers were so angry and horrified that they made the SS guards help clean up the camp. They forced them to carry the dead bodies. They made them dig mass graves. And yes, This included the female guards. There's a famous photograph from this time. It shows female SS guards carrying bodies. One of them is Herta Both. Their faces showed different emotions. Some look scared. Some look defiant. Some seem like they still don't understand what they've done. The American soldiers who liberated Dachau had a different reaction. Some of them were so enraged by what they saw that they executed SS guards on the spot. This wasn't official policy, but it happened. The crimes were so terrible that some soldiers couldn't control themselves. But most Nazi guards, male and female, were arrested and held for trial. The question was, what would happen to them now? Part 3. The trials begin. The world wanted justice. But how do you punish crimes this massive? Crimes against millions of people. The Allies decided to hold trials, and these wouldn't be ordinary trials. They would be something new in history. The most famous were the Nuremberg trials. These began in November 1945. The top Nazi leaders were put on trial for crimes against humanity, a new legal concept created specifically for these cases. The trials were held in Nuremberg, Germany, and judges came from the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. But Nuremberg mostly focused on the big leaders, the men who gave the orders. Hitler was dead. Himmler was dead. But others like Hermann Goering were put on trial. Only one woman was tried at the main Nuremberg trial, and she was eventually acquitted. For the female guards, different trials were organized. These were held in different locations across Europe, depending on which Allied nation controlled that area. The most important trials for female guards happened in Germany and Poland. Let's talk about some specific trials. The Belsen trial. This trial started in September 1945 in Lüneburg, Germany. It was the first major concentration camp trial. 45 people were accused, including guards from both Bergen-Belsen and Auschwitz. 16 of the accused were women. The trial lasted nearly 2 months. Prosecutors brought former prisoners to testify. These survivors told horrible stories. They described beatings, murders, and torture. They pointed to the guards who did these things. The female guards had different defenses. Some said they were just following orders. Some said they never hurt anyone. Some claimed they were just there to guard the perimeter and never went inside the camp itself. But the evidence was overwhelming. Too many witnesses. Too many consistent stories. And the British judges didn't accept just following orders as an excuse. The law was clear. Each person is responsible for their own actions. The verdicts came in November 1945. 3 women were sentenced to death: Irma Grese, Elisabeth Volkenrath, and Wanne Bormann. Others got prison sentences ranging from 1 year to life. Irma Grese was only 22 years old when she was sentenced to death. At her trial, she showed no remorse. She denied everything, even though dozens of witnesses identified her. When the judge read her death sentence, she barely reacted. On December 13, 1945, she was hanged. She was executed alongside Volkenrath and Bormann. British executioner Albert Pierrepoint carried out the hanging. The Ravensbrück trial. Ravensbrück was the main women's concentration camp. Over 100,000 women passed through this camp. About 30,000 died there. After the war, the Soviets held trials because Ravensbrück was in their zone of control. These trials were different from the Western ones. The Soviets were less concerned with individual evidence and more focused on collective punishment. Many guards received harsh sentences quickly. Dorothea Binz, the chief guard we mentioned earlier, was tried by the Soviets. She was found guilty and sentenced to death. She was hanged in May 1947. The Auschwitz trials. Auschwitz was the largest death camp. Over 1 million people, mostly Jews, were murdered there. Several trials dealt with Auschwitz personnel. Many female guards from Auschwitz were tried at the Belsen trial because they had been transferred there before liberation. But Poland also held trials since Auschwitz was located in Poland. The most notorious female guard from Auschwitz was probably Maria Mandel. She was the head female guard there. Survivors said she selected thousands of women and children for the gas chambers. She was tried in Poland, found guilty, and hanged in 1948. Part 4. The Ones Who Got Away. Here's the disturbing part. Many female Nazi guards were never caught. Some were never even identified. And some who were caught got surprisingly light sentences or were released early. Let's talk about why this happened. First, chaos. Germany in 1945 was absolute chaos. Cities were destroyed. Millions of people were moving around. Records were lost or destroyed. In this confusion, it was easy to disappear. A woman could claim her papers were lost in the bombing. She could say she was a refugee from the East. Who could prove otherwise? Let's talk about some specific cases. Hildegard Leckert was a guard at several camps, including Auschwitz and Ravensbrück. After the war, she used a false name and worked quietly as a worker. She wasn't caught until 1975, 30 years later. When she was finally tried, she only got 12 years in prison. Hermine Braunsteiner worked at Ravensbrück and then became a head guard at Majdanek death camp. Survivors called her the Mare because she would stomp prisoners to death with her heavy boots. After the war, she fled to Canada, then moved to New York City. She married an American and lived as a quiet housewife in Queens. Nobody knew her past. She wasn't discovered until 1964 when a journalist tracked her down. She was deported to Germany and finally tried in 1975. She got life in prison but was released in 1996 for health reasons. She died a free woman. How many others lived quiet lives and died without ever being caught? We'll never know. Historians estimate that hundreds, possibly over 1,000 female guards were never brought to justice. Part 5. The light sentences. Even among those who were caught and tried, many received sentences that seem shockingly light today. Let's explore why. After the first wave of trials in 1945 to 1948, things changed. The Allied nations were tired. The trials were expensive. They took time and resources. And as years passed, the desire for revenge cooled. Germany started handling its own trials. But there was a problem. Many German judges and lawyers had themselves been Nazis or Nazi supporters. They weren't eager to punish their former colleagues too harshly. Herta Both, the guard we mentioned earlier, was sentenced to 10 years at the Belsen trial. But she was released in 1951, after serving only 6 years. She lived quietly in Germany until her death in 2000. She occasionally gave interviews and never expressed real remorse. She always said she was just following orders. Irene Haschke was a guard at Ravensbrück. She beat prisoners and participated in selections for execution. She was tried in 1947 and sentenced to 15 years. She was released in 1952 after only 5 years. Ruth Closius-Nudek was another Ravensbrück guard accused of beating prisoners and killing children. She got the same sentence and was also released early. Why were they released? Several reasons. Some claimed illness. Some argued they had families that needed them. Part 6. The hunt continues. But not everyone forgot. Some people dedicated their lives to finding Nazi war criminals, including the female guards who escaped justice. Simon Wiesenthal was the most famous Nazi hunter. He was a Holocaust survivor who made it his mission to track down Nazi criminals. He helped find Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Holocaust, who was hiding in Argentina. Eichmann was captured by Israeli agents in 1960, tried in Israel, and executed in 1962. Wiesenthal and others also looked for female guards, but it was harder. They had been lower ranking. There were fewer photos of them, and they could blend into society more easily than men. The Simon Wiesenthal Center and other organizations published lists of wanted war criminals. They offered rewards for information. They pressured governments to keep investigating. Part 10. What this means today. So what can we learn from this dark chapter of history? Why does it still matter today, 80 years later? First, it reminds us that evil is not always obvious. These weren't monsters. They were ordinary people who made terrible choices. That's actually scarier than monsters because it means any society, under the wrong conditions, could produce similar crimes. If more people had spoken up early, maybe things wouldn't have gone so far. Finally, it reminds us that the quest for justice never ends.